When we've got rock stars like you on the show weekly, everybody is referencing you all the time, Connor. So you're a hot topic out there, man. You're killing it.
No, love coming on the show. Always appreciate the discussion. It's always a blast. And now appreciate everything you're doing as well. Love the podcast, love the attention, and I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion.
Hey, we're going to get into a few points that I want to lead off with. Of course, President Trump is on his way to Korea, I think, and he's going to meet up. He's been over there, dancing with the Japanese Prime Minister, getting cherry blossom trees for Washington. I mean, is this what presidents do? Is they just run around and do goodwill?
Doesn't seem too bad to me, but no, I mean, it's good to see. I mean, obviously, with a lot of the early narratives around tariffs, if we can move into a little bit more team building, I guess you can say, between these other countries. It's always been for me something. I think Trump, part of his negotiation tactic is to twist someone's arm a little bit, bring him to the table, and then change the attitude. So if this is the stage we're at, where some of these deals start getting done, and we don't have to worry so much about the threats that the market seems to be scared of, I'm fully supportive of that happening.
I'm loving it. As you guys see, we added a ticker for you. This came in from one of the XRP Army. They said, "Hey guys, put a ticker on the show." I said, "All right, we'll try that and see if people like it." I don't know if they will or not, but we are going to get into a tweet I put out here, because this gets into the strategy around the meeting with Xi. We have to look at Trump's strategies and how this, because I mean, the guy puts out a tweet and Bitcoin falls, 15%, I feel like, anymore. So do you think this has any bearing on the future of crypto in general?
The long-term potential of crypto, absolutely not. In my opinion, actually, the more torn apart a lot of the world is, and the more conflict there is, and a lot of the lack of trust between nations is actually a lot of the reasons why cryptocurrencies exist, because these nations will never stop doing business with one another. That has to happen, and creating neutral settlement layers for these nations to interact, where no one party can take control and confiscate another nation's assets, is critical. In terms of short-term price fluctuations, obviously these are impactful announcements. It seems like, for whatever reason, or the reason's obvious, but Wall Street has taken these assets and put them into the risk-on category of what they're seeing in their portfolio. So you see an announcement like tariffs, the headline comes in, algorithms trade off the risk-on assets of a portfolio, and we see kind of what we saw a couple of weeks ago with that big liquidation spike. Over time, I think as the market sophisticates and people get a better understanding that, or if someone can explain to me how a tariff impacts XRP or any of these other cryptocurrencies other than positively, I would love to hear it. So I think right now we're just seeing a little bit immaturity in how the market reacts to some of this news, and just broad selling based off of something that seems macro bad. But over the long run, I actually think it's outstandingly bullish for these cryptocurrencies, because we need neutral settlement layers for these people to interact.
Number one. That's the key right there, is I think this starts to level the playing field around all of this. The other thing that kind of has a little bit of an impact, I feel, on the market is how the economy is doing. One of the things that has been talked about here recently is this whole issue with jobs.
Coming to you with two out of the block here. Two questions off the jump here. One, on this Amazon layoff news, what's the economic read-through in your mind?
I think it's an improvement of margin, but nothing to worry about as a recession. If we rewind to 2022, 2023, you saw massive tech layoffs. I think we had 150,000 layoffs in 2022 alone, and that included 18,000 from Amazon. Tech, in my mind, is notoriously bad at right-sizing employee counts. And I don't want to diminish the impact to actual humans losing their jobs. But if we look at X, for example, when Elon Musk took it over, he cut over 50% of the workforce, and it's still operational. You're talking about Chegg cutting 45%. So I think this is just the normal course of finding the new equilibrium in tech. Amazon especially has to do that, because they're ramping up robotic workers, automation. But at the same time, they have the lowest margin out of the Mag 7 at about 10% net margin versus an average of 25% for the rest of the Mag 7.
Okay.
So necessary move to restructure.
I feel like this is a much deeper problem than what we're seeing on at least out in public right now. Because you've got major companies, even UPS, also in this crowd. Obviously, we're going to see this in the retail side. And I think if we do see, kind of this flow into jobs becoming much more of a problem, it's only going to accelerate the Fed. How do you think Chair Powell is going to respond to all of this?
Yeah, I'm looking at two things here. Obviously, we're in this weird predicament where AI is coming in and replacing a lot of these jobs. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a huge catalyst for a lot of this. I'm
Yeah.
really curious to see if this actually impacts company earnings in a positive way or negative way, depending on, hey, if they actually get better results out of AI with cheaper inputs, that would be really interesting. The problem is, though, it's still going to create issues on Main Street, right? So, like on Wall Street, this might be something where it doesn't have a huge impact to the stock market initially. It could even be positive depending on how this reflects in company earnings. But then, of course, you have the Main Street issue, which ultimately trickles back into what we see
Right.
on Wall Street. So it's definitely going to be something to monitor. It's going to be really interesting to see if these people get relocated to other jobs or they're permanently displaced by something like AI. But this is something that is going to be continuing to trend, in my opinion. I've seen reports that, funny enough, Amazon Web Services went down after this, but I think they'll probably get it right, that something like 75% of code is now being pushed by AI at a lot of these companies. So it's going to be something to watch for. I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the job market because of AI. And the predicament between how mainstream is hit versus how Wall Street is hit is going to be something to pay very close attention to. I think long term, obviously, these people have to be relocated, have to be able to find new jobs productively in order for this not to create a larger macro issue. But initially, it's just how well can AI replace it for how much cheaper, and how much of an impact is that going to have, and how big is the relocation problem going to be?
Well, this is what I coach a lot of people, young entrepreneurs, business owners, etc. You guys need to start creating and treating crypto like a business, and start utilizing it that way. Because I think individuals that maybe they're being laid off or they are in threat of being laid off, the opportunity, I mean, you can pick up gig jobs, all sorts of things to where you can just figure out how you get more XRP and be able to put it into an asset that can eventually become yield bearing as well as appreciating. And that's the thing that is going to outpace inflation and all these problems in terms of jobs. And if you're smart and you make this your career and you start doing the research, whether you diversify in other digital assets, this is going to be an asset class that's not going anywhere. So, it's kind of like the day trader of the last couple of decades. I'm not saying day trade. I'm saying spot and hold. That's the way to play these markets out. Take loans against it, low loan to value ratio, and that's how you grow wealth. This is how the rich people do it, guys. So pay attention for
I
sure.
think the advent of the internet and social media and things like this podcast alone have really opened people's understanding to a lot of investing in the financial world. And I think we're going to see a huge boom in careers outside of your typical legacy
You
W-2
think the
jobs.
gig business was a boom? I think the new fintech era of digital assets is going to dwarf the gig business.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think it's easier than ever to start up your own company as well. You don't need an entire software team to spin up a website anymore, right? You can
Yeah.
just pay $15 a month and you can have a professional website. So all these tools are coming, and I think it's going to be easier and easier for people to be a lot more a lot more self-sustaining. Now, the problem is are the people getting laid off going to have that mindset, right? Like, what age group,
Yeah,
what
a lot of
demographic
times that's
is
the
it?
problem.
Like, that's where the problems can start to come in if these people don't have the technical capabilities to adapt in where we're headed. That's the hard thing for me to predict. It's going to be something that I think is inevitable at this point with what AI is doing to the job market, but it could have serious downstream effects, like what you're saying, if these people can't properly pick up new work.
I'm telling you, the people that I'm talking to in the Gen Z crowd, the young millennials, these are smart people. They've just been working for other people. It's not a bad thing. It's how you earn money. But the point is that your side hustle should be figuring out digital assets. That's all you should be worried about. Don't be doing an Uber job. Don't be going out there and doing Postmates. That's going away. Get out there and figure out digital assets. Learn how to run a chart. Look at how to read macro news and follow the market. I'm guaranteeing this is a success for those guys that are out there.
The market prices a lot of this stuff in ahead of time. If the Federal Reserve was to come in and do something like half a basis point cut, I think that you would see an immediate impact because that would be unexpected. So you have to weigh unexpected versus expected. If you're talking about going into a better macro cycle for the cryptocurrency market, lower interest rates are going to be a huge catalyst. Looser money, easier investments, those kinds of things, more risk on are all going to be good for crypto, but it might not be reflected on that day because a lot of people like myself, people like you, right? We've been talking about this. We've known this is going to come and we've been positioning ourselves because of that. And a lot of people have. So you might not see that immediate reaction, but going into a lower interest rate environment, in my opinion, is a no-brainer in terms of being good for the long-term macro setup.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think the point here is that you've got to look at the impact on the market itself, whether or not he's going to actually announce that we are going to get into quantitative easing. I think if that is done, huge.
They changed the policy too, right? So like they're now not necessarily going directly for that 2%. They're going for something close to 2%. And you know, I always thought that made the most sense. I mean, I say this all the time, but everyone go look at the 100-year chart of United States inflation. People act like it just stays steady at 2%. Like it doesn't, like it goes up and down and up and down. It's never sat at 2%. So if you're anywhere within plus or minus a percent of 2%, right? Between 3 and 1, like I would argue you're doing pretty well. It's really the slope of the line that matters, right? You don't want to be going straight up off 2% because you could get to 5 pretty quickly, and that's a problem. You don't want to be going straight down from 2% because you could get negative pretty quickly, and that's a problem. But if you're just kind of going up above 2, down below 2, up above 2, up to 3.1, like those things, that's normal. We've seen that throughout history. It's never going to stay at a flat 2%. Everything's price is changing every single day. You just don't want extremes in either direction. So for me, like things look excellent. Like I don't know if it could look too much better with the realistic expectation that it's not just going to trade flat at 2%, or at least it hasn't for the past 100 years. So I'm not expecting that to start.
Yeah, I think it starts to solidify what the Fed has been looking to try to get to do and correcting it. The key here is guys, we are at astronomical interest rates right now. You know, 4.5%. There's been where we've gone almost a decade under 2% in terms of interest rates. This opens up real estate. It opens up investing in businesses. This changes the dynamic even for our own national debt, which is really what they're trying to get to. I anticipate by May of next year, we're probably going to be at 1.5 to 2 points.
Oh yeah. And look at the non-manipulated interest rate market, things like car loans. They're almost all at 0 APR right now. Like the market is demanding
lower interest.
that interest rates come down. It's like that's where our market seems to be set from a more free market perspective. The Federal Reserve has the capability to manipulate higher, but even looking at things like mortgage rates, I mean, mortgage rates are continuing to trend downwards regardless of what's happening on the Fed side. So in my opinion, the market is actually pulling these rates down a certain amount because there's just no demand at these higher rates. And I think the Federal Reserve has tried its hardest to hold this line knowing this was going to be the direction and see how long they could hold on to it high to try to get some reset and take some of the heat out of the economy. But to me, it just seems like it's inevitable that these things are going to be much, much lower a year or two from now, certainly.
Listen, there's some other news out there that I think is going to impact XRP around, you know, when you look at business to business transfers, what we'll see in terms of nation states, a lot of integrations into cross-border settlement, which is where I still believe is going to be Ripple's stronghold, obviously for obvious reasons there. We're starting to see a little bit of transition into stable coins, but even that in itself, when it's bank to bank, is still a big problem. That's where obviously XRP rolls into this. So what do you think the impact, will Visa carry in more interest from businesses into cross-border settlement?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the most important lesson I take away from this stuff is that For the longest time, it was this big question of like, right, us as enthusiasts see this technology as very useful and very impactful. But for the longest time, we didn't necessarily see businesses agreeing and ushering the same things, right? We saw plans, we saw pilots, but right now what we're seeing is a huge validation that this technology is exponentially better than what essentially they've been using before. So I
Right.
believe that validation is absolutely massive because for the first time, we see these people actually acknowledging the fact that they need to upgrade their systems. How the plumbing ends up working is going to be super interesting. Are they going to issue stable coins on already existing public networks? Are they going to create their own centralized, decentralized, quasi blockchain to be able to handle things on their own? I think, regardless, no matter what, you are going to need public blockchains to be able to act as that internet of value that connects all of it.
Bingo.
I give this example all the time. The internet has to be free and open, but it doesn't necessarily mean my website needs to be free and open. There's going to be different layers to this stuff. It's going to become super, super complex. There's going to be new protocols that abstract certain
All
capabilities
the
away
time.
from hosting things away. And it's going to be really interesting to see how these big, big players in the traditional landscape come in, and also interesting how public blockchains pivot to remain relevant in the structure they demand. At the end of the day, these guys are the people bringing the transactions, they're bringing the volume, they're bringing trillions of dollars. And there's no doubt in my mind that public blockchains are going to be exponentially valuable in this world we're heading into. And I think in certain ways, businesses could plug in perfectly to what's already there. And in certain ways, public blockchains are going to have to adapt. I know for XRP, there are huge, huge initiatives around privacy right now to meet what these institutions are looking for. And I think the chains that adapt and understand the environment we're heading into and understand the things
Huge.
put in place for these institutions to come in comfortably are going to win out. That's why I was so excited to see XRP ledger clawbacks go into effect, as well as different things like permission domains. These are things clearly being ushered in by institutions who want the ability to interact with these chains in a way that's going to work for their business. And it's going to
Right.
be very important that the ethos of crypto understands that there's going to have to be essentially feature sets to allow these institutions to interact with the chains in the way they need because of regulatory reasons.
Yeah, and it's going to be a kind of a scenario, I think, where you've got really just a flip side of how the finance industry is going to be run. I think BlackRock already sees this with what we're going to see with tokenized treasuries. The RWA market itself is already starting to migrate in.
I would say the biggest question from central banks is what is the role of tokenization and digitization? How quickly should they think about digitizing their own currency? What does that mean for the role of the dollar? If every currency digitizes and we have what does that mean for bank payments? What does that mean for the payment companies like MasterCard and Visa? All these are being questioned right now. I think we spend so much time talking about AI. We're not spending enough time talking about how quickly we're going to tokenize every financial asset and the opportunity we're going to have a digital wallet and moving ETFs and other things through a digital wallet. And I think that's going to happen worldwide very rapidly. And I think most countries are ill-prepared for that and underappreciate how technology is changing that, not unlike how technology is changing AI and other things. It will be changing the technology around the plumbing of finance.
Everybody saw the news on Western Union, okay? And I know you have some comments on this, but when you heard the news on Western Union, because remember, Western Union tested XRP, and now they've gone in and selected Solana, which is, I was like, whew, we dodged a bullet. I feel like, anyway, what was your initial thought on that?
I actually put out a post on this, and if you don't follow traditional markets, you might hear the name Western Union and be like, "Oh, Western Union, that's a big loss." I mean, I put out a post. I said, talking about Western Union, I said this company might be bankrupt before they move $1 billion on Solana. Keep focusing on Blockbuster. I'll focus on Netflix, and that's
Yeah.
really how I felt. I mean, you have this company who makes all its money essentially gouging people with fees,
Bingo.
and then they're moving to a feeless technology. Look, Western Union is not like, they might move a decent amount of money today. I think they said like a couple hundred billion. I
Yeah.
think that might be even smaller than what, I mean, significantly smaller of what's already being done in the cryptocurrency market. I don't care who was landing deals with Blockbuster 3 years before they were totally destroyed by Netflix. I want to
Yeah.
know who was working with Netflix. I think it's a little bit of a paradigm shift in how people look at the market, but in my opinion, I agree with you. I was never that excited about the Western Union XRP things back before, because I always looked at Western Union as a company. I was like, not only is this a bad business model, but their business has been in decline essentially since it went onto the public market. It's just gouging people for fees when we're moving into a world where money can be moved without fees doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, actually, though, I feel like this might save Western Union. I think they were forced into this decision with Solana. Now, granted, whether or not they stay with Solana, but there's a lot of critics right now that are kind of hitting on this, because you got to remember, this is like an 8 to 10% fees in some of these countries, especially around cash conversion, because the cash conversion and then the agent commissions, their FX spreads, all of this is basically compliance overhead that they've got to deal with. So they're pricing that in, and they're doing it now mainly on Solana's blockchain to kind of get in the point of, reducing fees, because that's one of the biggest problems. But the big risk right now is still this vertical integration. This is the problem with Western Union. I think this, if they can't reduce fees in conjunction with what their costs are going to be done, the cash out and agent infrastructure is the one. Because this is the point I'm getting at. When you think about, they have to pay all of these agents, because all these Western Union shops have physical locations, right? They're in these grocery stores, these seedy back alleys. They're paying for that spot. That's not going to reduce. That cost is still there. So it's not like all of a sudden we have Solana reducing our overhead cost. I don't think so. I think they continue to be predatory.
Oh, I agree. And I just think there's no hope for that business model. I mean, sending money is something that's just going to get exponentially easier and easier. And it's very similar, if anyone followed what happened with the traditional automotive sector and Tesla. They had all these dealerships that were like in a
Bingo.
serious problem, because all these traditional dealerships were trying to push inventory of the highest margin, most profitable cars, which were the legacy auto. But then they're getting all these EVs that they're supposed to be selling, but the dealerships don't want to sell those. And now we're in a world where no one even wants to go to a dealership. Like, people are perfectly happy going online and buying a car and it's showing up to their house. So you have this whole segment of your business that's critical and a cornerstone, and you're trying to cannibalize that business at the same time. It's a very hard transition. People, I can guarantee you, anyone is not going to want to show up to a Western Union and start moving money like that when they can just go onto their phone and have it done in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And especially not if they're getting raked by fees when they could be doing it for free on another platform. So it's going to be a very difficult transition. And the other thing that I don't think was really widely reported was essentially Solana paid $25 million for 6 months of exclusivity on this deal. So we'll even see if this Solana exclusivity
Is that true?
sticks around.
25 million?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Why would
That's what I'm seeing from people initially reporting on it. So if that could be subject to, it was actually this or that, but that's what I'm seeing in terms of how this deal went down.
So I've got some inside connections over at Solana. I'm gonna hit these guys up and say, what are you guys doing? Is this just a branding thing that you're trying to lock in and win something big in cross-border settlement? Because this doesn't really seem like it doesn't look like a natural Solana fit, because Solana has been fairly edgy. This is old school business that's aging out. I just don't see it. I don't know. I want you to think about that kind of company and imagine a financial juggernaut like that does all these acquisitions and starts to create an infrastructure, not only for banking, cross-border, competing with Swift, the biggest companies in the world. Who does that sound like?
It's one of the things that Brad said in the very early days. He wanted to develop really the Amazon Web Services of the cryptocurrency infrastructure. And You know, it's been one of those things for me that's always been something that has just made a ton of sense for this industry. With an industry with a lot of innovation, but a lack of product market fit, that's been one of those things that has always been glaringly obvious for me. And one of the big reasons why I've personally been so focused on Ripple and XRP, it just seems to make a lot of sense. There seems to be clear demand. There's a clear product market fit, and building things that are going to have longevity. Those are the kinds of things that get me really excited.
Let's not forget, Evernorth. Okay, all this was announced on October 20th. What are we? October 29th right now? All right. We're 10 days into this thing. And you've got companies backing them, SBI, Pantera Capital, Kraken, all of that, and this is not just a holding asset company. This is one that's actually going to generate yield. Huge difference here. What are your thoughts on this company right now?
Oh my God. I mean, I love the rollout. It's one of those things where obviously we need to sit back and see how they execute and how things do, because right now it's off to an extremely exciting start. But one of my always pushbacks with MicroStrategy is like they acquired all this Bitcoin, but there's never been any kind of communication on how they're actually going to generate money. They have this old dying legacy business. They bought a whole bunch of Bitcoin. They said they are never going to sell Bitcoin, but they're not making any money. Like there's no actual business model to service the debt that they took out to purchase the Bitcoin. I just think the direction and the early leadership and the early statements of how the company is going to run, in my opinion, have all been very well received by the market. Like if I am an investor in this company, right, like I don't want to be told that the plan is we're going to buy a whole bunch of XRP and figure it out later. I really like the fact that it seems like they've got really good, smart approaches and how to create an actual operating business with profit to be able to be self-sustainable. So I think it's off to a really good start. I think this is something that's going to be very good for the XRP ecosystem, because it's going to really bring someone in who's developing specialized products to use the XRP ledger's core infrastructure. And I think a lot of people are going to follow suit. A lot of people are going to see that things happening and say, oh, I didn't even realize this was possible. Let me do this. Oh, there's newfound volume here. Let me start bringing volume here. So I only think it's a good thing. I think the people at the top of Evernorth are really the best you can get, with Ashish Burlow and David Schwartz both sitting there. I mean, it seems to me like this is going to be a fun one to watch.
This will be the first publicly traded XRP treasury company outside that's moving into this layer. I know there are others out there, but this one was created for this purpose. Also, you've got active yield generation. There's not going to be a strategy of just holding. They're going to run validators. You also started talking about integration for DeFi on-ramps, so that changes things. All of this is big because if you look at all the 11 companies that hold XRP right now as a treasury asset, I think it's up to 2 billion right now. These guys just sucked out half, one company, okay? So being led by Ripple, and remember, this was a former Ripple guy. Ashish Burla was there, so he kind of understands what's going on.
He was there for a long time too. He was one of the earliest people there, I think, outside of the initial founding crew, and he's someone I've always paid really close attention to. He's a sharp guy, and man, this was one of those things that took me off guard. I don't think I was ready for this one, but I was very happy when it got rolled out.
What do you make of the theory of these pre-allocated option contracts? Have you heard this?
Oh yeah, it's funny. It's been something that's, I think, in the community has gotten pushback in terms of, oh, that can't be a thing. But I mean, it makes a ton of sense to me. If I'm a company and I'm seeing what Ripple is doing and I'm worried about holding XRP on my balance sheet or the custody of XRP, or I don't really know what I'm doing, but I want an option on the price appreciation of that XRP. Absolutely, right? Yeah, Ripple, just keep holding that XRP in escrow. I'll throw you this amount of money, and we'll get this thing pre-allocated. And once XYZ rolls around and it makes sense for us to take ownership, let's do it. And it's not even like there's not proof for this. Greg Kidd, one of the very early creators, or one of the very early employees of Ripple, he had an option contract on 1 billion XRP, and there was another person very early on who had another option contract on a certain amount of XRP. So it's not like this wasn't something that Ripple was actively doing. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a huge lineup of companies who all have similar deals, all on certain sections of the escrow, but they don't want to make it public. They've been trying to do this stuff in stealth. They don't want to get a hard time from the regulators for holding it. So, hey, we'll do this, hold it for us for now. And when XYZ rolls around, like, we'll look to execute this option and take ownership, or maybe they'll just say, hey, let's roll this into Ripple custody and we'll continue to hold it with you.
Well, and could they earmark this for some major players? Because this could, I mean, the amount that we're talking about, this could be earmarked for G7s. You know, we're talking about the top countries out there, possibly specific governments, including the U.S. government. Now we're getting into, you know, conspiracy theory land. But the point is this would make perfect financial sense for U.S. government to jump in this direction.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of those things that I've said. Like, people look at the escrow, right, and assume that all that XRP is unallocated and owned by Ripple.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the truth. Ripple is currently holding that XRP in their escrow, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the titlement to that XRP. We have no idea who that XRP is necessarily titled to. A lot of it could be Ripple. A very small amount could be allocated through these options contracts, or a very large amount of it could be allocated through these different contracts and pre-allocated. We have no idea, but what we do know is what is in that escrow right now is the max amount total. So it really is probably a number under what we're publicly seeing in that escrow. I think that's a huge question, and I think it's going to be super interesting to see as this stuff starts to get rolled out and people feel like they can publicly talk about it, where a lot of this shakes out.
Well, and I want you guys to think about this and remember this term, because I'm going to give it to you today. And that is, I got a chance to see the PayPal mafia being created, okay? And the evolution of where all those founders eventually went. And if you look at where Ashish Birla came from, which, remember, he was Silicon Valley, came over to Ripple. You've got Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, his role across the NSA into Ripple. I mean, we've got a lot of power players here. I'm going to call this the Ripple Mafia. Yeah. This is the Ripple Mafia being formed right now.
I saw one of the funniest things about the SEC case, because you got to really like learn about some stuff going on in the early days that we probably wouldn't known about. Ripple had a meeting with the Federal Reserve in 2013. I've worked at a couple startups. You don't just get meetings with the Federal Reserve. No. I don't know how they did that 1 year after becoming a company, if that. It kind of seems like they might know some people. It kind of seems like they might have some connections. It kind of seems like there might be a certain level of facilitation by some of these organizations to get to.
And is Evernorth the beginning? That's the key. Is Evernorth, could it be the bellwether of how all this starts to play together? You got to look at all these acquisitions, strategic acquisitions, G-Treasury just happening just last week. Obviously, we've seen Rail. All these tied in, Mataco on the early stage. Most likely we're going to see, I think, another dozen applications and integrations that will be acquired in 2026 that will probably layer into what Evernorth is doing strategically from a revenue generation standpoint.
Yeah, and let me make a quick point on that I think is important for everyone to understand. Ripple always gets crap for selling XRP, but look what they're doing with selling XRP. They're acquiring critical market infrastructure that's going to build out the XRP ledger ecosystem deep into these banking institutions. All these other companies and foundations, what they did was took a whole bunch of money for VCs, gave their token away for dirt cheap.
And
then dumped the token on their market, but those VCs don't necessarily care about the project.
No,
they're just doing it to build up their next investment, or they're doing it to build up their own business. So the nice thing about what Ripple does is, one, they're super transparent about what they're doing, but it's going and being reinvested into building out the architecture and this ecosystem of the XRP ledger. And all these other things, they can say, oh, we're not dumping it, but we gave it all to this other person who's dumping it and it's not coming back into the ecosystem. So it's so funny, the lack of understanding of how.
I don't understand that. I don't get that, Mickle. I just don't see how people cannot understand the negative nature of how these VCs work. Listen, I've had to deal with these guys. I know what it's like. They are there for one reason and one reason only, all right? And that is to extract value. That's it. They're not building value where you're talking about adding companies, eventually one day go IPO. All of this plays into, I think, a bigger strategy. And even Brad was talking about this last week. He said, hey, XRP is at the center of everything. Lock in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like one of those things for me. I come from the same mindset as you. It's like the only reason, and that's why I think you see a lot of pushback from the VCs on XRP, because it's a complete shift
It's
from what they
untouchable.
want. They want
Yeah,
everyone to think that they're necessary. They have to be
Yep.
involved. You need these VCs to start it. And what Ripple did with XRP is direct proof that you don't need that to happen.
Right.
So they're not incentivized to promote it. They didn't get any early allocation. And it's a direct threat to them being able to kind of wiggle themselves into a very cheap allocation of these tokens that they can ultimately sell for a profit. But the problem is when they sell for a profit, they could care less about building out the ecosystem. That goes into their business. When Ripple ultimately sells XRP,
they're dumping on the plebs. That's all they're doing. There's
Rail, Treasury, Medico, they're just acquiring critical infrastructure that is linking the XRP ledger to thousands and thousands of financial institutions.
Yeah.
That's where I want the ecosystem being built out, not into some random VC's next pump and dump token.
Well, in G Treasury, if you dig into G Treasury, this company goes deep. And I didn't realize how deep they were in terms of their banking relationships and what they've done globally, how they even got on the list for an acquisition. Because I'm like, this company has super upside. What are they thinking? Unless they're saying, hey, we're joining the Ripple mafia. A big lobbyist in DC. He's positive, but he's a little skeptical that the Clarity Act gets passed this year.
But I'm really excited because the Clarity Act, it'll be law probably in the next 90 days, further defining the law towards this vision I'm giving you.
What are your thoughts?
You know, government timelines are normally something where if the best case scenario is this, add 6 months and you'll be pleasantly surprised. So
Yeah.
I generally agree. One of the things I'm very pleasantly surprised at is like we just got a new CFTC commissioner who's very pro XRP.
Yep.
We have the SEC commissioner, Paul Atkins, who's very pro XRP. Both these people are pro crypto. It seems like all the narratives coming out of government are not only pro Bitcoin, they're all pro cryptocurrency, pro digital assets. Yeah. There's a huge amount of people inside the government who want to see these things happen. I've been shocked this entire time on how serious they've actually rolled out a lot of these initiatives. I thought it was all just let's go pander to the
a lot of pandering.
Get a bunch of votes, and then year 3 we might usher in something. So to be honest, I don't care if it happens this year. I thought this was going to be happening in year 4 of Trump's term. If it happens at any point in the next year, I'm going to be blown away with how quickly we moved on this.
This tells me something, Mickle, and that is when you look at why the government is going so fast. Some people would say, okay, it's just kind of Trump's, MO. I think there's something brewing in the background from a global liquidity issue, a potential reserve, a reserve asset push, whether it's gold tearing into China. We see it already starting to make its way into central banks. Digital assets now seem to be the selection of this administration. So it's very possible we could see some pretty big news in the next 12 months. There could be some major changes. And everybody's been talking about this reset potentially. It's still very possible we could see something that grandiose occurring.
Absolutely. And I think if it does happen, the saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. I think those two things probably happen at the same time.
Well, risk assets wins, guys. That's at the end of the day, as we kind of talked about at the beginning. If you're not in assets right now, you should be. So not financial advice, but you should be thinking about getting away from the dollar because that's just a debasement of where your spending power is going. If you guys don't understand that, do some research on the dollar debasement and how assets are the only key to building wealth. Mickle, been always good chatting with you. We'll get you back on another episode. I love breaking down the news with you, but thanks for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Love coming on the show. Always a blast and always available to pop on. It's always a great discussion, so thank you for having me.
You bet. All right, you guys, you know what to do. One of the things that I try to get everybody to primarily do here is subscribe. We just hit 250. This channel, mainly because of its focus on XRP, but I think also in general of the people that are coming here are truly trying to learn about digital assets. So hit subscribe right now. Make sure and follow Mickle over on his channel. You can catch him over on YouTube under Mickle. I'll drop their link right there on the screen and bring up his channel. You guys, of course, can check him out over there. We'll catch you next time right here on the XRP Pod. Take care.